Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So for today's discussion, I have chosen 10 very important articles and 3 of them are largely mains oriented and we have 7 articles which are more prelims oriented. So let's discuss all these articles one by one and help you cover the newspaper for today. So what I would like to say is that if you watch these sessions, you need not go back and read the newspaper again, ideally. If you're constantly attending these sessions and if you're regular, if you're consistent, the discussions that we have should be sufficient to cover almost all the important topics in the Hindu newspaper. But of course, it's always suggested that you spend some additional time in going through the newspaper on your own as well. So if you're liking these initiatives, do support us by pressing the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's begin with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by taking up this article from page number 10 that is related to history. It's quite rare to get articles related to history, but of late Hindu has been providing a lot of important articles that are relevant to history as well. Generally, we don't associate current affairs with history, but of course, whenever there are some new developments which come to light, that gets reported in newspapers and could be very, very important for our exams. This article on page 10 deals with the Copper Age and some new findings that have come out through genomic studies that shed some light on the demise of the Copper Age. So let's understand this article comprehensively. First, let's understand what is the Copper Age. What period does it fall under? What key developments were noted during the Copper Age? And why is it significant as far as human civilization and evolution is concerned? So let's talk about the Copper Age first and then take a look at the findings of the new study which has come out. See, the Copper Age is when metallurgy came into being. Humans started perfecting metal work and started introducing copper into the making of tools and weapons. And this completely transformed mankind. This age is also referred to as the Chalcolithic Age. That's the other name associated with Copper Age. Experts place this period between the Neolithic Age and the Bronze Age. Even though the exact start and beginning of these ages is not determined, roughly these ages span a few thousand years, and we do have a rough categorization of when these ages and periods begin and end. So most experts agree that Copper Age is between the Neolithic Age and the Stone and the Bronze Age. Some experts are of the opinion that it marks a transition period between the Stone Age that marked the Neolithic period extending towards the Bronze Age. So experts look at the Copper Age as a transition period between these two, between the Stone Age and the Bronze Age. But one thing is very clear, that as far as human civilization, human development and cultural development is concerned, the Copper Age played a critical role. It transformed mankind. It transformed the economy and the very nature of human settlement and human activities. Hence, it's a significant part of our ancient history. It was in the Copper Age that humans figured out that by adding tin to copper, that they could produce a much stronger alloy called bronze, which would then lead us towards the Bronze Age. When certain civilizations around the world, when they started smelting copper ore and when they started producing copper metal, this itself was a huge advancement, a scientific and economic advancement. Because copper was a strong and tough metal which was malleable as well, which could be shaped into different tools and artifacts and weapons. The Vinca culture is considered to be the first to have developed the knowledge and skills to process copper and handle copper as early as the 6th millennium BC. In different parts of the world, the knowledge would pass across, and communities across the world would develop their own copper smelting methods. And this evolution in metallurgy and metal work is what transformed this period. This transformation would have a huge impact on every aspect of life, from hunting, agriculture, to the whole nature of the economy and the nature of the civilization itself, right? The development of copper had a huge impact, which further carried forward to the Bronze Age. That is why it's a very, very significant period in our ancient history. Because previously in the Stone Age, when tools and implements were made using stone, the strength and the abilities were very limited. Because stone could be brittle, it was quite difficult to work with stone as well, and it may not be long lasting as well. But the emergence of copper and its usage in tools, weapons and artifacts completely transformed economy and even warfare. As a result, battles became more intense. Possessing copper became a symbol of power for civilizations. It became a precious metal of that era. So obviously, such a precious metal would have a widespread impact, not just on the economy, but on the politics and the culture as well. So many experts, they see this as a transitional period between Stone Age and the Bronze Ages, and they place it within the Neolithic period itself. While some see it as an age between the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, some place it as a transitional period between Stone Age and Bronze Age within the Neolithic period. Roughly the time frame that you're looking at is mid 5th millennium to early 3rd millennium. Roughly this period is categorized as the Copper Age, from 5th millennium BC to 3rd millennium BC, roughly. Of course, the adoption of copper didn't happen simultaneously in every part of the world. Over a period of few thousand years, copper was adopted at different points in time, and definitely it introduced major changes. This tough and strong metal, which was malleable, it gave rise to a new economy of its own. It became a symbol of prestige. Civilizations which could produce copper and make tools and implements out of it, they became very strong and powerful. It transformed the nature of the economy. The very nature of hunting, farming and agriculture, and warfare underwent a dramatic change during this period. So hence Copper Age is a critical phase in human evolution and human civilization. We notice that during this period, humans became more sedentary as well. Human lifestyle started becoming more sedentary because now hunting became easier, agriculture became more efficient, battles and wars became more intense, and those who possessed copper weapons, they became stronger powers. So we saw the emergence of settled human habitations, including the rise of walled settlements, particularly in Europe. Is that clear? So this introduced a more sedentary lifestyle where civilization started settling down through walled settlements, and hunting, farming, and the overall economic activities became more simpler for humans with the adoption of copper. So naturally you can understand how important this development was and what was the impact of the adoption of copper on human economy, human civilization, and human development. Now with regard to Copper Age, there has been a new study which has been published in the popular scientific journal Nature. This scientific study, it is based on genomic data which has been drawn from ancient fossils of individual fossils found in southeastern Europe and in northwest region of the Black Sea. Researchers have taken genomic samples of ancient individuals and their fossils from this particular region, from Southeast Europe and Northwest region of Black Sea, which roughly corresponds to today's South Ukraine and the region around it. Because this is where you find evidence of a transition happening from Copper Age towards the Bronze Age. Researchers have always found enough evidence at these sites, particularly in Europe, that marks the transition of human civilization from the Copper Age towards the Bronze Age, where humans figured out that by adding tin, we could produce a stronger alloy, that is bronze. Right? So the study changes our understanding, especially with regard to the time period of the demise of the Copper Age. This study will aid us in better understanding the end of the Copper Age, which roughly occurred around 3300 BC and led to the expansion of pastoralist groups, particularly in the European steppes region. In the European steppes grasslands region, pastoral farming became the norm, particularly after 3300 BC. As Copper Age was declining and came to an end, and as we entered the Bronze Age, pastoral farming became the norm in these parts of Europe. So this has always been known, but the time period and the overall understanding was something that was clouded. But now the latest study has given more clarity on this, and it actually shifts our time period itself. It was believed that ancient human genomic data will help us understand the developments in human civilization. Because by studying genomic data and also by studying fossil data, researchers, archaeologists, etc., they will be able to figure out the major landmark developments as far as human civilization is concerned. In this latest study, with regard to Copper Age farmers and steppe pastoralists who mark the transition between Copper Age and Bronze Age, the interaction between them is believed to have been occurred at least 1000 years before than previously thought. Previously, it was believed, based on scientific evidence, that Copper Age started declining and started coming to an end somewhere at the mid of 4th millennium BC. This is where we saw, or we believe, that a transition happened from Copper Age towards the Bronze Age, where farming methods changed and steppe pastoralist farming was widely seen across southeastern Europe. But the latest understanding is pushing back the time period by at least 1000 years. We always believed that between 4th millennium and 3rd millennium BC, this is where Copper Age saw its demise. This was the earlier understanding. Between 4th and 3rd millennium BC is when we believed that Copper Age came to an end. But the latest study has pushed back this time period by at least 1000 years. Now it's believed that pastoralist farming in the steppes started coming up much earlier due to interaction between Copper Age farmers and the steppe pastoralists. So researchers have found scientific evidence to point this through genomic data. Previously, the understanding was there were two major genetic turnover events for which you can find evidence in Western Eurasia, that includes southeastern Europe extending towards Russia and Central Asia region. In this region, based on the archaeological evidence and genomic data, researchers always believe that there are two major genetic turnover events, because the changes happening in the economy, in the field of politics, warfare, etc., obviously starts reflecting in genomics as well, right? Human genetics will also undergo a change, and that gets reflected, and that gives us more insight into the culture and life of that period. One major turnover event was the one associated with the spread of farming. Farming in general, settled farming, started spreading at the beginning of Copper Age. At the beginning period of Copper Age, that is somewhere around 6000 to 7000 BC, right before 5th millennium BC. This is the period where farming started spreading as copper became widely adopted. As I told you, it didn't happen simultaneously around the world. By 6000, 7000 BC, copper was being used in certain parts of the world, but widely it was adopted by 5th millennium BC. That's why 5th millennium BC is considered as the start of the Copper Age. So with the adoption of copper, farming became widespread, settled farming became a notable feature. Now, after this, the next major genetic turnover event is the expansion of pastoralist groups, particularly in grasslands, and even the emergence of nomadic groups, the re-emergence of nomadic groups. This is noted around the period of 3300 BC. Now previously we always placed Copper Age between this period, roughly between 5th millennium to 3rd millennium. This was always categorized as the Copper Age. But this new economy which copper introduced, new forms of metallurgy, new forms of making tools, weapons and implements, altered the economy, and now evidence is showing that the transition from Copper Age towards the Bronze Age might have happened a little earlier than previously thought. Previously, the demise of Copper Age was placed at around 3300 BC. Now the time period is being pulled back by at least 1000 years because the latest study has clearly given evidence to show interaction between Copper Age farmers and the European steppe pastoralists. This is roughly said to have occurred around 4250 BC, thus pushing back the demise of Copper Age by at least 1000 years. So this is the significant finding that has been brought out through this study. Researchers have studied the genetic data from around 135 ancient individuals from this part of Europe, that is in today's Ukraine. And the genetic understanding gives us an idea that the transition towards steppe zone population, towards pastoral farmers from Copper Age happened around somewhere around the mid of 4th millennium BC and not 3rd millennium BC as previously thought. So our understanding of Copper Age and its demise is being pulled back by at least 1000 years because the genetic data has given evidence to show cultural interaction and economic interaction and contact between these two different periods. Is that clear? This indicates a transfer of technology as well between farmers and the transitional pastoralists and hunters. From the Stone Age to Copper Age and from Copper Age to Bronze Age, there is a transfer of technology being noted. The technology of processing metal, working with metal and coming out with weapons and tools and implements by using that metal. So that transfer of technology is also noted and evidence can be found for this through genetic studies as well. So this is the clarity brought out through the latest study. Is that clear? The demise of Copper Age, which was earlier thought to have happened around mid 3rd BC, is now believed to have happened around mid 4th millennium BC. Is that clear? So that is the key finding and it indicates an early contact between Copper Age farmers and the European steppe pastoralists. Clear? So this finding could be relevant for your prelims, even for your mains examination as well. So now let's move on to the next article on page number 10 that is related to artificial intelligence. In fact, we have discussed very similar articles in the past as well, where we talk about AI, its pros and cons, the benefits and risks posed by artificial intelligence. So today we shall specifically focus on this article. The article is highlighting certain benefits and concerns associated with artificial intelligence. So let's talk about this and develop an understanding as to why AI technology has to be regulated by governments. The author is arguing that artificial intelligence is without a doubt a game changer technology. It is something that is already driving the 4th stage of the industrial revolution, along with other critical emerging technologies such as robotics, machine learning, 5G, 6G networks, Internet of Things, right? Along with all these critical emerging technologies, AI and in the future combined with quantum computing will drive research and development and innovation. We already see a huge impact of AI technologies in aiding research and innovation. You forget quantum computing, forget the future of AI. In the present times itself, at least since 10-15 years, we've already seen the wide adoption of AI into research and development and innovation. This has already led to a major disruption in many key sectors, in critical sectors. For example, in the field of pharmaceuticals and biotechnology, large-scale developments have happened which have been entirely driven by state-of-the-art artificial intelligence. Let me give you an example. Google's DeepMind AI. DeepMind is a Google AI platform which helped in understanding the protein folding structure, and it has more or less solved the protein folding problem. See, as you know, proteins are made up of amino acids and they are layered or structured in a certain manner. Understanding the protein structure is critical as far as biotechnology, pharmaceuticals and life sciences are concerned. By understanding protein structure, you can better understand diseases and develop cures and medicines more effectively and more efficiently and easily. So, for researchers, the biggest challenge with regard to protein structure was the number of combinations that was possible with regard to the structure of proteins. Since there are thousands of different types of amino acid formulations and structures, it would have taken us millions of years to decode the protein folding structure. It was seen as something insurpassable or insurmountable for humans. Now, through AI technology, Google's DeepMind AlphaFold AI platform has decoded the protein folding structure in 2020. Now, this has made many possibilities happen for the pharma industry and the life sciences biotech industry. It's made the pharma industry focus on rare diseases which were earlier neglected because of the complexity involved in understanding the protein structure. Now, through AI platforms, now that we have more or less solved the protein folding problem, researchers have access to the protein structure. It's easier for them to carry out drug discovery, even for rare diseases and disorders. In fact, several neglected diseases, they are getting more attention in the last few years by the biotech and pharma industry because there is a better understanding of the protein structure thanks to the solving of protein folding problem by Google's DeepMind AlphaFold AI platform. This is just one development we are talking about. Similarly, in many other sectors, for example, look at how a AI robotic synthesizer could read a research paper written by researchers and scientists, understand the formulations that they were talking about, and it could produce a chemical compound autonomously on its own. This was a landmark event that happened in 2020. Essentially, a robotic module which is driven by an AI algorithm, it understood the research paper written by scientists, it comprehended all the data and the information present in the research paper, and autonomously, without human intervention, this robotic synthesizer, which was a chemical synthesizer, produced that chemical compound. Now, this alters the world of chemistry. It reduces the need for human intervention. Is that clear? This was a landmark development. We can see the same with regard to our understanding of climate change and environment and disasters as well. For example, the World Environment Situation Room, which is a platform created by the UN Environment Program to understand climate change, environmental change and disasters. It has deployed AI tools to analyze sensor data from more than 140 countries to better assess and understand the impact of climate change and how it is aggravating disasters in the world. It has given a very accurate prediction of the melting of glaciers and the rising sea levels by collecting the big data from more than 140 countries and through sensors and satellites around the world. Is that clear? This has been done through an AI platform. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for humans, or it would have taken a very long period to come out with such accurate assessments. So definitely, with regard to artificial intelligence, there are numerous advantages. There is no doubt. There are tremendous benefits for mankind. It can bring more efficiency. AI platforms, they have no fatigue. The error rate can be minimal or zero. And it definitely brings a faster response, more efficiency and effectiveness into all forms of the economy. So definitely there are tremendous benefits from artificial intelligence. but at the same time, along with all the benefits, there are some serious risks and concerns as well. It's not just about replacement of jobs. It's not just about machines performing tasks which involve an ethical angle. It's not just about that. Even if you look at day-to-day functioning of our institutions, be it government institutions, private companies, etc. Currently, there is a certain way in which we work. There is a certain way in which we measure efficiency and effectiveness and excellence of individuals at a workplace. Now today with AI, this is being completely disrupted. Now look at what generative AI can do. Generative AI platforms like ChatGPT, for example, it can create completely authentic and organic content. It can write articles, it can publish audio, video and other forms of media which is based on the large language model that it has learned from. By learning from patterns and the data which it is fed through, these generative AI platforms can create completely original content. They cannot just write stories, essays or create content, right? They can even write research papers today. That is the ability of generative AI platforms. Now when that is the case, tomorrow, how do we evaluate human efficiency at workplace? How do we keep a check on the misuse of AI? These are some key questions that are raised by the author. Now take for example, let's say there are a team of researchers working in India. They are putting in hard effort. They are working in a traditional environment without using AI, and they're coming out with a new research and they're documenting their research in a research paper. Now imagine in a developed country, let's say in Western Europe or in US, a team of researchers who are working on the same technology or innovation, if they have access to AI tools, their research will be more faster. They might come out with quicker results, more accurate results, and they might use generative AI platforms to write a research paper. So thereby they might get a lead ahead of Indian researchers. So tomorrow, if that is the case, if those who have access to AI tools are more efficiently carrying out research and working more efficiently and producing quicker results, what will happen to the have-nots? What will happen to those who do not have enough resources with regard to artificial intelligence? This might end up creating an AI divide. That is a bigger concern. We will witness the emergence of a AI divide, which would be much larger than the current digital divide. See, the emergence of electronic digital technologies and communication technologies has already created a divide between the rich countries and the poor countries. Even within every country, there is a divide, a digital divide between the rich and the poor. Now, for example, within India, look at access to internet. During the pandemic, for the rich and the upper class and the middle class, it was easier to switch to online modes of work, online modes of education, etc. But the poor people who may not have access, who may not have the required skills, they would be left behind. During the pandemic period, during lockdowns, the poor people in India without access to internet, mobile phones, etc., they were left behind. It has widened the developmental divide between the rich and the poor in the country. The same happens with regard to rich countries and poor countries. Those who have access to resources, those who have the infrastructure, the technology, they will progress, leaving behind the poor. So the writer is arguing that artificial intelligence is only going to widen this divide. Those who have access to AI tools and the resources and the infrastructure, they will produce more efficient work. They will report rapid advances in their respective domains, thereby seeing faster progress. But those who do not have access to AI tools, they will have the risk of being left behind. So this could widen the AI divide in the world, further increase the divisions between developed countries and underdeveloped countries. Within countries, within societies, AI tools can drive a divide between the rich and the poor, creating more socio-economic inequalities. And upon this, we have the risk of misuse of AI. AI tools being misused by irrational actors or anti-national elements? What if AI algorithms are used to produce deep fakes, which we discussed yesterday in our Hindu analysis? If vested interests, malicious actors, if they produce fake images, visuals, audio, text, which is designed to spread fake news, rumors, and instigate riots, create law and order problems or security problems, if that becomes more widespread, then we are dealing with a security nightmare as well. These are the two big concerns with regard to AI. One is with regard to the emerging AI divide. The other is with regard to the security concerns regarding misuse of AI. And the other problem that the writer is highlighting is how do you measure efficiency in the workplace? How do you evaluate the excellence of individuals in the coming years? If AI becomes more widespread, how do you exactly quantify the efficiency of an individual or a group of people, right, who may not have access to AI and those who have access to AI? How do you compare them? How do you rate them? This will determine the future of jobs, the salaries people will be drawing, right? Those with the right skill sets, they might get a higher pay, whereas those without the right skill sets might get left behind. So to address all these challenges, these concerns, these risks, the writer is urging the governments to focus on regulation of AI. The writer is urging the governments to act because several countries are actually falling behind, including India. Even though we are already adopting AI, there is no regulation. We don't even have a data protection law. Forget a law for regulating AI, we don't even have a data protection law. So countries like India and many others, they are still way behind the curve, whereas across the economy, across the industry, AI tools are already being widely adopted. AI is already making a huge difference in all of our lives, and yet there is no regulation. So the writer is urging governments to pay attention and fast track the process of assessing the risks from AI, and immediately they have to come out with appropriate regulatory mechanisms to keep the risks and concerns under check. Is that clear? That is the argument the writer is making. Now, before I proceed to the next article, I would like to give you a very important prelims fact. Since the article mentions the World Environment Situation Room, you should know what this platform is all about. There might be a prelims question here. The World Environment Situation Room is an initiative of the UN Environment Program. The UNEP has set up this initiative to use big data and AI to understand our environment and ecosystems, to understand the impact of climate change and how it is driving disasters around the world. This platform draws data from thousands of sensors around the world, along with geo-referenced data from remote sensing and Earth observation satellites. More than 140 countries are part of this initiative, and they are sharing all the research data that is needed through their meteorological sensors, radars, satellites. All the data that is captured by various countries is shared into this pool of network. And through big data and AI, World Environment Situation Room is assimilating the data and assessing the data to come out with observations about our environment, about how climate change is driving more disasters and how it is driving changes in our ecosystems. So that is the platform created by UNEP. Now coming to the next article, on page 11, let's talk about Sustainable Development Goal number 2. This is the focus of the article. The article is focused on zero hunger, which is the second goal of Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. I hope you know that under the SDG campaign of the UN, 17 broad goals have been identified with several targets under each goal. These goals are supposed to be achieved by the world during the implementation period, that is between 2015 to 2030. During these 15 years, the Sustainable Development Agenda, or also known as Agenda 2030, is being implemented through the United Nations. So across different domains and socio-economic indicators, goals have been chosen by the UN with specific targets. And SDG 2, goal number 2, deals with zero hunger. The second goal of sustainable development is to end hunger by tackling food insecurity. It's focused on improving nutritional levels across the world and promoting sustainable agriculture. Because see, the world has enough resources to produce food for everyone. But still, in many pockets of the world, people are suffering from acute hunger and malnutrition. In poor countries, in war-torn countries, people do not have access to food. In several developing, underdeveloped countries as well, there is a huge inequality with regard to access to food and nutrition. Now take India for example. India produces sufficient food to match the needs of the entire country, of the entire 1.4 billion population. But still, India reports high levels of hunger and malnutrition and the risk associated with hunger and malnutrition. This is due to inefficiency in agriculture. This is due to inefficiency in the supply chain and the mismanagement of the distribution systems. So food security can be achieved because we do have enough resources to produce food for everyone, but this requires efficient management of the food supply chains. Right from farm to stores to your plate, the whole supply chain has to be made more efficient. It has to be made more sustainable. Distribution has to be made more fair so that every section of the society has equitable access to nutritious, healthy food. This is an achievable goal. Hunger can be eliminated with the right policies and interventions. That is why UN has mandated this as the second goal of SDG, that is achieving zero hunger by improving food security, improving nutrition, and by promoting sustainable agriculture. Now, with regard to achieving this goal, there is a global report which tracks the progress of countries. This report is called the Global Report on the Food Crises 2023. It's an annual report which is published by the Food Security Information Network and the Global Network Against Food Crises. These two institutions, they bring out this annual report on food crises around the world. It highlights the extent of food insecurity around the world. That is the purpose of the report. So this year's report was published recently in May 2023. And according to the report, the number of people suffering from acute food insecurity has increased for the fourth consecutive year in 2022. The report has pointed out that over the last 4 years, consecutively, acute food insecurity is increasing around the world. This is a key observation, a key finding of the report. The report has pointed out that the primary reasons responsible are the adverse economic conditions created because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war. The lockdowns due to the pandemic and the economic impact of the pandemic and the disruption in global supply chains caused by the Russia-Ukraine war. These events have primarily contributed to shocks in the food economy, in the food market, that has driven food prices, leading to food inflation. Along with that, we have adverse weather and climatic events, extreme weather events, which has also affected production levels. So combination of these factors has increased acute food insecurity and hunger around the world, according to the global report on food crises. Is that clear? The report has pointed out that between 691 million to 783 million people are suffering from hunger as of 2022. And the number of people suffering from acute food insecurity has increased for the fourth consecutive year. Acute food insecurity is nothing but where a person or a household, they have access, their access to sufficient food and nutrition is severely limited or restricted. A given individual or a family, if they do not have enough access to healthy, nutritious food that is required for their well-being, then in such a state, which results in acute starvation and even death and deficiencies and diseases. Such a situation or a state is called acute food insecurity, according to the report. So the findings of the report is extremely important. The report is pointing out that there are many risk factors which are pushing the world away from achieving SDG goal number 2. The report is pointing out, even though we have seen some progress in tackling hunger and food insecurity, these risk factors, these economic shocks created by the pandemic, the Russia-Ukraine war and other environmental factors, they are derailing our efforts, and by 2030, by the end of the decade, almost 600 million people will be undernourished, which means at the current rate, on this current track, we are unlikely to achieve zero hunger, which is the Sustainable Development Goal number 2. This is the alarming finding of the report. But of course, there are some positives as well. The report does point out that we have tackled problems such as stunting, wasting, and undernourishment. With regard to these key indicators, the world's performance has definitely improved over the last few years. See, stunting is a condition where a child who does not receive adequate nutrition will fail to grow to the required height for the required age. The child tends to be shorter on average for his or her age. Such a state caused by hunger and malnutrition is called stunting, where the growth, the height of the child is affected. Wasting is a condition where, due to malnutrition, a child fails to achieve the ideal weight for their given age. Is that clear? Stunting is a factor of height, whereas wasting is a factor of weight. So if stunting and wasting levels are high, it indicates high levels of malnutrition and undernourishment, and this could drive various diseases and deficiencies. It's a vicious cycle that gets created. Children who suffer from stunting and wasting, they are undernourished and malnourished, and they will suffer from various diseases, right? They will not be of good health, and it pushes the family into poverty. The family will end up spending all the money they have on healthcare and basic nutrition, and they get pushed into further poverty, and further this becomes a vicious cycle. Poor families will not be able to afford nutritious food, and thus driving that vicious cycle. So with regard to tackling stunting and wasting, the world has done quite well, and there has been some progress. India itself has made a lot of progress when it comes to tackling stunting and wasting. We have shown very big improvement in the last 2 to 3 decades. But however, when it comes to eliminating hunger altogether, the world is not on track according to the global report. See, food security is defined as a state where all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe and nutritious food to match their or meet their dietary requirements and food preferences for an active and healthy life. This is the comprehensive definition of food security laid out under the World Food Summit of 1996. It means every individual, every family should have equitable access, both physical and economic access to food all through the year, at all times. All people at all times should have physical access and economic access. That means food has to be affordable and it should be reachable to the people. This should be sufficient, safe and nutritious to meet their dietary requirements and food preferences as well, so that the people can lead a healthy life, an active life. That is the definition of food security. Now clearly many countries have failed to achieve this standard. If you look at India itself, even though there is enhanced access to food, both physical and economic access to food, we can't say the same about its safety, its nutritional value. We can't say the same about matching the food preferences of the people. Because see, in some regions, people prefer meat. In some regions, communities might be more inclined towards plant-based diet. So by matching the cultural, socio-economic preferences for food in different regions, in different communities, the state should ensure that people have equitable access, all the time access for nutritious food, which is affordable. This is the true definition of food security. If there is a failure on any of this account, on any of this parameter, it will result in food insecurity leading to malnutrition. So this food insecurity is measured through a scale called Food Insecurity Experience Scale, which is used to bring out this global report on food crises. The extent of food insecurity, the severity of it, is measured through this index, through this scale called Food Insecurity Experience Scale. Is that clear? So the report has noted that there are few specific reasons in the last 4 years which has driven food insecurity around the world. Please make a note of this. Between 2019 and 2022, during this 4-year period, there have been few adverse developments which has increased food insecurity. Beginning with the economic slowdown caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and all the disruptions created by the pandemic. The pandemic affected agriculture, affected food processing industries, affected the whole supply chains. This was followed up by the Russia-Ukraine war, which further hit food production. Key food exporting countries like Russia, Ukraine, when they went to war, food supplies around the world were disrupted, leading to increase in food prices, causing inflation, thus making food costlier and unaffordable to the poor people. Along with that, poor government policies, increasing urbanization, and environmental factors, particularly extreme weather events. These factors have contributed to falling agricultural production, disruption in food supply chains, and thus affordability of food, access to food has been affected. This is the key finding of the report. The report also concludes that food insecurity in urban areas is lesser. It means urban areas have better amenities, better distribution channels, whereas rural areas, even though they produce the food required, due to poor distribution and due to poor logistics and back-end supply chain, there is food insecurity in rural areas which is higher than compared to the urban areas. Because see, the food which is produced, it has to be stored safely. Some food items will require cold storage, right? Especially fruits and vegetables which are perishable, which have a shorter shelf life. Certain commodities, food commodities, will require good warehousing facilities to keep them away from pests and rodents, to keep them away from getting spoiled. So if you don't have good back-end logistics, if you don't have the required infrastructure, including cold storage, warehousing, you also need good road and rail network, good connectivity to transport the food efficiently and on time. All these are critical factors which play a role in food security. Please note this down. Even the availability of electricity, availability of water, they all play a role in food security. What's the use if you have cold storage without electricity in the region? Right? These are critical infrastructural problems to be solved by the government. Now, these amenities and facilities needed are better available in urban areas as compared to rural areas. So in rural areas, due to the inefficiency of back-end logistics, there is more wastage of food. There is poor distribution of available food, thereby increasing food insecurity in rural areas. These are divides and differences that have to be noted by policymakers. That is why such reports are very, very important. So what can we do going ahead? Since we are likely to miss the zero hunger target by 2030, according to the report, what measures can be taken? That is a question UPSC might ask. UPSC might ask you to evaluate the findings of the report and present a solution, a way forward for India and the world to achieve zero hunger by 2030. So what you can suggest is that, first and foremost, we should use such reports as indicators. We should pay attention to such reports which are scientifically developed. We should rely on the parameters, the key findings of these reports, and identify the target group. Policy making, decision making at the government level should be driven, should be informed based on such reliable data, based on such reliable reports. At the national level, even we should come out with a very accurate scientific assessment of the level of hunger in the country, the regions, the communities which are most affected, the deficiencies in our logistics, Once you pinpoint the problem areas, you can easily identify the target population, identify the areas where you should pay more attention through your governance. Nutrition should become a fundamental goal. It's not just about providing sufficient food. The question is whether the food being provided and distributed, is it nutritious enough? So governments and as well as the civil society and the private sector, they should all adopt nutrition as their fundamental goal, not just supplying some food. Nutritious food has to be supplied. Policy incentives can be provided by the government to encourage private players and shops to provide for fresh food in the place of processed food. Processed food is known for its poor nutrition and health risk associated with them. So the government can actively discourage shops and the last mile distribution channels to stop selling or at least minimize the selling of processed food items and promote the selling of fresh food items. That is one way of providing better nutrition. Then street food is very, very important. Don't neglect the importance of street food. I'm sure all of us love street food. According to the global report, 2.5 billion people on a daily basis, they depend on street food because of the cheaper cost, affordability, and also in general the taste. But as you know, street food may not be nutritious enough and it may not be entirely safe for human consumption. This is an area which is not regulated at all for safety standards and nutritional standards. So the report is urging governments to pay attention to the quality and safety and the nutritional value of the street food which is being served, as large part of the population is consuming street food on a day-to-day basis. The government should also pay attention to the infrastructure, the support given to farming, the infrastructure with regard to connectivity, road and rail connectivity, support given to farmers and their linkages with the industry. If farms are very well linked with food processing industries and small medium enterprises, food wastage can be reduced. So this will require more investments. That too from the government, there should be more public investments in creating that logistics and infrastructure on the back end, providing better connectivity through road and rail network, providing electricity and water, providing cold storage, warehousing facilities. Even this will play an important role in ensuring food security and nutrition. So these are some measures and suggestions you can provide in the answer to highlight how India can tackle the challenge and how we can try and achieve the target of zero hunger by 2030. So this completes my detailed discussion of 3 important articles in today's newspaper. Now we come to the last part of today's discussion. We'll look at the prelims articles which require a smaller discussion. Please look at this article on page number 3 related to environment and ecology. The article is referring to alien invasive species and how they can threaten native habitats. When I say alien species, of course, I'm not referring to extraterrestrial beings. I'm referring to non-native species that enter an ecosystem which threaten that ecosystem itself. For example, there are many plant and animal species which are not native, which are not endemic to a given region. These non-native species, they can enter ecosystems from the outside accidentally or deliberately as well through trade. For example, a plant species from South America can enter India. The plant species may not be found in India at all, but because of agricultural trade, because of exports and imports between the two sides, a species that is native to South America might enter India, right? So because of globalization, because of the global nature of trade, you might see such plant and animal species crossing over into other habitats and ecosystems where they are not native. And some of the species can be invasive. Any such outside species is called an alien species. As I told you, a species not found in India. Let's say the species enters India from the outside. That is an alien species. Some of them can be invasive in nature, which means they can spread very quickly. They can take over the entire ecosystem. A particular plant or animal or a fish or any kind of organism which has entered from the outside, which is an alien species to us, it could spread very quickly in the ecosystem, dominate the ecosystem and threaten the native species. The native plants, animals, etc., they could get affected because of the invasive spread of the alien species. So alien invasive species is a threat to our ecosystems and biodiversity. That is why countries are very, very cautious and careful about their restrictions, their import restrictions. For example, if you have ever traveled to a developed country, let's say if you have ever traveled to Australia or European countries, they have very strict biosafety checks and standards. For example, they don't allow you to bring any kind of mud, soil material, plant material, or even farm products without sufficient checks, hygiene and sanitary checks. You're not allowed to bring any kind of agricultural commodity or soil or any other living organism without required checks and safety measures. They're very, very strict about this because they don't want any alien invasive species to enter their country. Even India has similar standards. But due to the nature of globalization, today there are plenty of alien invasive species which have damaged the environment around the world. So the article is talking about a type of aquatic weed which is actually native to South America and Central America. This weed is technically called as Ludwigia peruviana. Please make a note of the name. Could be important for your prelims. It primarily is found in Peru. That's why it's named after the country Peru. It's called Ludwigia peruviana. This native aquatic weed found in South and Central America, specifically in Peru, has somehow entered the Indian subcontinent. It's not native to India. It's a foreign alien species. The suspicion is that it has entered India through the root of ornamental plant root. Ornamental plants which are grown for their aesthetic value, right? Through that route, the weed might have entered India. Because this weed gives very beautiful flowers, yellow colored beautiful flowers, which are used in landscaping, in ornamental design, etc. Through this route, the weed has entered India and now it has spread across the country and it is taking over ecosystems. Specifically in Western Ghats, in elephant habitat areas, it has taken over the aquatic swamps and it has grown to such an extent that grass availability has been affected. Is that clear? This weed has dominated the aquatic swamps in South India especially, and in these swampy areas where grass was growing naturally, grass growth has been compromised because of this because of this invasive alien species. Now, if there isn't enough grass availability, it will obviously affect the animals that depend on it. The threatened species of South India, like the elephants, the gaur, right? These are threatened species and they are not finding enough grass at these aquatic swamps as the grass has been replaced with this weed, which is not palatable. Elephants and gaur, they don't consume this weed. It's not palatable for them. But it has replaced the grass and other small plants, native plants, which has affected the availability of food for elephants and gaur in the elephant habitat areas of Tamil Nadu. So that is the key finding of this article. All right. Next, moving on page number 4, we have an image that the Hindu carries. It's depicting India Gate, which is lit up in this teal green color. It was done yesterday to mark the occasion of World Fragile X Awareness Day. Yesterday was World Fragile X Syndrome Day. Fragile X syndrome is a genetic disorder. Please make a note. It's a genetic disorder caused by changes in a gene called FMR1 or Fragile X Messenger Ribonucleoprotein 1. Because of this change in protein structure, people who do not have this protein structure, their brain development gets compromised. This protein structure in your gene is critical for brain development and for your day-to-day functioning. But there are few people who unfortunately suffer a deficiency here. They report a missing gene. FMR1 gene will be missing and this directly affects brain development. So as a result, people suffering from this syndrome, it affects their learning abilities, their emotional abilities, etc. Is that clear? It affects their mental and cognitive abilities. They become slow learners. It affects their motor abilities as well. It affects their social, emotional response, their interaction with others. All these basic activities get affected in people suffering from Fragile X syndrome. It usually affects males more than females. Even though both males and females are affected, the symptoms are more severe in the case of those suffering from, in the case of males, those suffering from the FMR syndrome or the Fragile X syndrome. So please make a note of this disorder. It's a genetic disorder affecting males more seriously than females, and it primarily affects brain development. The symptoms are noted at a very young age because there will be developmental delays. With regard to motor abilities, a child will show slower progress in sitting, walking, and in achieving other milestones. With regard to learning abilities as well, such children would be slower than the others. They won't be able to comprehend emotions easily like the others. This affects their social interactions and their behavior as well, causing behavioral problems. It might even contribute to autistic spectrum disorder, right? So it's a very serious syndrome, and that is why yesterday was marked as the World Fragile X Syndrome Day. Next, on page 5, we have an article related to defense and international relations. INS Kirpan, which is a missile corvette of the Indian Navy, has been decommissioned from service. It has served India for 32 years, and this missile corvette, which you can see here, has been decommissioned from service from the Indian Navy. But the ship is not going to waste. It still has few years of service left, and India is gifting this missile corvette to Vietnam as part of the close defense relations between the two countries. Please make a note. India and Vietnam are close strategic partners in the Indo-Pacific, and India has gifted INS Kirpan to Vietnam to strengthen Vietnam's navy. And don't forget, Vietnam has a standing dispute with China in the South China Sea, a standing maritime dispute in the South China Sea. So India and Vietnam enjoy very close defense relations, and India has supplied INS Kirpan to Vietnam's navy. Next, on page 7, we have an article related to national and internal security. Home Minister Amit Shah has inaugurated the Aviation Security Control Center. A centralized aviation security control center has been inaugurated by the Union Home Minister. This will basically integrate all the control rooms present at airports in India. All the control rooms of more than 60 airports in the country will be integrated into a centralized control center. I hope you know that currently Indian airports are secured by a paramilitary force, a central armed police force called CISF, the Central Industrial Security Force. So CISF, which manages and maintains the security at all the airports, runs the control rooms where all the CCTV images and other real-time data is available. So all of this data will be integrated into a centralized command center to deal with any security emergencies in the future, to deal with hijacking situations or terror attacks or any other form of crime or security incident at airports. There will be a real-time centralized coordination center at the national level that will integrate the security rooms, the security control rooms of all the airports in the country. All right, so it's a major development as far as internal security is concerned. Next, we have an article on page 8 that refers to Tele-MANAS initiative. According to the article, under Tele-MANAS helpline, 2 lakh distress calls have been resolved by mental health counselors, thereby extending mental health care facilities to people in the country. So Tele-MANAS is a mental health care initiative that was launched by the government of India after the COVID-19 pandemic. Because the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns and social isolation increased mental distress, anxiety and depression amongst people. So the government launched this key mental health care initiative, which was announced in the budget of 2022-23. It's part of the National Tele-Mental Health Program that is led by NIMHANS, based out of Bengaluru. the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences. So through this facility, the Tele-MANAS facility, remote counseling, tele-counseling is provided to those suffering from mental disorders and conditions. Those suffering from anxiety, depression and other mental disorders, they are given free counseling and free mental health care services under the National Mental Health Program. It's a 24/7 facility where people can call a certain number, and on the other end they'll be connected with mental health counselors who will counsel them, guide them and advise them and put them on the right medication as well. So that is the Tele-MANAS initiative. Next, we have an article related to environment and ecology that focuses on Indian vultures. See, India had a very healthy vulture population until the 1990s. According to data from the BNHS, the Bombay Natural History Society, India was home to 40 million vultures in early 1990s. India had 40 million vultures of different subspecies as of 1993. But within few years, by early 2000, we saw a 97 to 99% decline in vulture population. Vultures were pushed to the brink of extinction in the country, particularly the oriental white-backed vulture, long-billed vulture and slender-billed vulture. Their population declined by 97% within few years. The population of oriental white-backed vulture, which you can see here in the image, declined by a staggering 99.9%. So this led IUCN to categorize these 4 vulture subspecies as critically endangered because they were driven towards extinction. So initially it wasn't clear as to why vultures were dying in such large numbers, but further studies confirmed that there was a toxic agent that we humans were introducing into the ecosystem which was harming the vultures. This was nothing but diclofenac or diclofenac, which is a anti-inflammatory drug. See, if you have any inflammation, when you go to the doctor, doctors usually prescribe non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs such as diclofenac. When given to humans, it has no adverse consequence on the environment. But the same anti-inflammatory drug was administered to cattle in the veterinary animal husbandry industry on a large scale in the country. To treat cattle, their wounds, etc., they were administered with anti-inflammatory drugs such as diclofenac. The problem was the carcass. The carcass of the cattle would contain the residue of diclofenac. And as you know, vultures are scavengers. They scavenge on carcasses, dead rotting bodies. So when vultures consumed the dead carcass containing the residue of diclofenac, this became toxic to them because they cannot digest diclofenac. It affects their renal functioning. It would lead to renal failure in vultures and they would start dying. And this happened on a large scale very quickly, and India saw a massive decline in vulture population. Now please understand, it's a protected species. It's under Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act, which means it has the highest level of protection. And because of this event, because of the usage of diclofenac in treating cattle, there was widespread destruction of vulture population. So that is why the Government of India, Ministry of Environment and all concerned stakeholders have taken many initiatives to revive the vulture population, at least in captivity, and then release them back into the wild. In Haryana, you have a vulture breeding and conservation center, the Jatayu Conservation Breeding Center, where vultures have been captively bred in captive environments, and now they are being released back into the environment, into the wild. So many other institutions are also playing a key role in these projects. Under the project to conserve and protect vulture population, captive breeding has been promoted across the country, and government is working with various conservation groups to captively breed these threatened species of vultures and release them into the wild to increase the vulture population. Now diclofenac has been banned in the veterinary industry. Once the risk was realized, the government placed a complete ban on usage of diclofenac as far as treating cattle was concerned. All right, and captive breeding now is helping in reviving the vulture population in the country. Coming to the last article on page number 9 refers to International Seabed Authority. This institution and the member countries, they have agreed to come out with deep sea mining rules by 2025. As you know, deep sea mining is becoming very lucrative. Many big powers are exploring deep sea mining, especially beyond their national jurisdiction, beyond their exclusive economic zone. So beyond the EEZ of countries, big powers like India, China, US, Russia and other big powers, they're all exploring the possibility of mining nickel, cobalt, copper and other precious minerals and rare earth elements from the deep sea seabed. So such mining activities beyond national jurisdiction, beyond the EEZ, is regulated by this authority called International Seabed Authority. So please know more about the ISA, very, very important for your prelims. It is responsible for regulating mineral exploration and all mineral related activities beyond national jurisdiction under the provisions of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. It was established in 1994 and it's headquartered in the Caribbean at Kingston in Jamaica. Alright, it consists of 167 members along with European Union and all the parties to UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. So India of course is a party to International Seabed Authority, and any deep seabed mining activities, any mineral related activities on the seabed beyond EEZ is regulated through International Seabed Authority. It regulates deep seabed mining. It also plays a role in conserving and protecting marine environment from pollution and toxic substances, and also enables marine scientific research by working with research organizations and various countries. This is the primary function of International Seabed Authority. So the members have agreed to come out with deep sea mining rules to regulate deep sea mining by 2025. So this completes my detailed discussion of today's newspaper. We have covered 10 important articles with all the relevant details, and I expect you to take up these questions for your mains answer writing practice. I hope whatever we have discussed is clear. Do let me know how the session went in the comments, and I'll see you in the next class, that is tomorrow at 10 a.m. So till then, take care and have a great day.